Amish homes are known for their simple design, a symbol of a quiet life. But for hundreds of years, almost every single one had a secret extra room. A separate building, often steps from the main house, built to handle the heaviest, hottest work of summer. This isn't just some old storage space. It's the forgotten heart of how entire families manage to survive and eat well all year. This single room changed everything. So what was this secret room, really? It was called a summer kitchen, and its job was simple: to keep the main house from turning into an absolute oven every single summer. See, around the mid-1800s, two things happened at once. First, families got their hands on new cast-iron cookstoves. These things were amazing for cooking, but they radiated a crazy amount of heat. Great in the winter, but a nightmare in July. Second, families on the farm were growing and raising everything themselves. We're talking massive gardens and orchards. All that food had to be processed for the winter: canning, pickling, making jams, you name it. It was hard, hot, and often smelly work that could go on for days. Doing all that inside the main house was just not an option. So, they built a solution right in their own backyard. The summer kitchen wasn't just a convenience. It was the engine room of the entire farm, making sure the family stayed cool while they worked to stay fed. Imagine trying to work in a room with the heater blasting on a 90-degree day. That's what the main farmhouse kitchen felt like all summer long. That cast iron stove didn't have an off switch. Once it was lit for breakfast, it stayed hot, pumping a dry, suffocating heat into the air for hours. Researchers looking at old farm records from that time described the heat as oppressive. And that's putting it mildly. Now add to that the high season work. All those vegetables from the garden had to be canned. Fruits had to be turned into jams. Meats had to be preserved. This meant huge pots of boiling water steaming up the house for days on end, adding a thick, humid misery on top of the stove's dry heat. The smell of boiling vinegar for pickles or rendering lard would hang in the air for weeks. Living in that, working in that, was just unbearable. The women of the house, who did most of this work, desperately needed an escape. And that's exactly what the summer kitchen was. These weren't a new invention. Separate kitchens had been around for a while. But from about 1850 all the way to the 1930s, they became a standard feature on farms across the country. Typically, it was a small, simple building, maybe the size of a modern-day garden shed or a small bedroom, just big enough for a stove, a chimney, and a work table. It could be attached to the house by a small walkway, or completely separate out in the yard. The goal was simple: get the heat, the steam, and the smells out of the main house. All that hot, heavy work could happen out in this dedicated space. The family could eat their meals in a cooler dining room. At the end of the day, they could retreat into a home that wasn't a sauna. In the hottest part of the afternoon, they might even head down to the cool, quiet basement to rest. It's actually hard to find old diaries where women wrote down just how brutal it was to cook indoors all summer. But you don't go through the trouble and expense of building an entire second kitchen unless the problem is absolutely massive. This wasn't a luxury, it was a necessity. So for almost 100 years, the summer kitchen was the unsung hero of the family farm. It wasn't until after World War II, when electricity and natural gas finally made their way to rural homes, that things really changed. With new, modern stoves, you no longer needed a separate building to escape the heat. And slowly, the summer kitchen, once the most important room on the farm, started to fade away. So what did one of these summer kitchens actually look like? Well, they weren't just shacks with a stove thrown inside. These buildings were cleverly designed for one primary job: to act like a giant heat funnel, pulling all the heat and smoke from cooking and channeling it away from the main house. The whole design started with the stove itself. That big, black iron cookstove sat at the heart of the room and connected directly to a tall chimney or stovepipe that went straight up through the roof. This was the first and most important feature. It meant all the smoke, steam, and a huge amount of the hot air from the fire was pulled directly upwards and shot outside, instead of lingering in the kitchen. The buildings themselves were usually simple, rectangular structures, sometimes with one story, sometimes with two. They were just big enough for the essentials, maybe the size of a modern garage or a large bedroom. But the real genius was in the airflow. These kitchens were built with windows on multiple walls, often on opposite sides of the room. This allowed for cross-ventilation. You could open windows on both sides and get a constant breeze flowing through, pushing the hot, stuffy air out while pulling cooler, fresh air in. It was a simple, natural form of air conditioning. You can still see these design principles in action in old summer kitchens that are standing today. Many were built with a simple wood frame, or sometimes from stone or logs, but almost all of them had a sturdy brick chimney as their backbone. This whole system worked together beautifully. The chimney sucked hot air out from the top, and the windows pulled fresh air in from the sides. All that intense heat from canning, baking, and rendering lard was contained in this one small building, leaving the main farmhouse cool and comfortable. It's a solution so practical that some old-order Amish communities still use a separate summer kitchen today, proving that a smart design doesn't always need modern technology to work perfectly. It was an incredibly effective system, built with basic materials and a sharp understanding of how air and heat actually move. But this clever design wasn't just for show. The amount of work that happened inside one of these kitchens is almost hard to believe. This wasn't just a place for cooking dinner. It was a full-blown food factory, running non-stop through the harvest season. Remember, this was before you could just run to the grocery store in January. If you wanted to eat, you had to preserve everything the farm produced during the summer and fall. And we're talking about a staggering amount of food. Imagine a huge garden and an orchard full of fruit trees. All of that produce, all those beans, tomatoes, apples, and berries, had to be processed before it spoiled. So this little building, maybe the size of a modern one-car garage, was constantly filled with the sounds and smells of work. Huge pots would be bubbling on the stove for canning and pickling. The air would be sweet with the smell of jellies, jams, and apple butter being made in massive batches, enough to last the entire winter. Other things would be laid out for drying or packed in salt for preservation. And it wasn't just fruits and vegetables. When it came time to butcher hogs, all of that messy, demanding work happened out here. This is where meat was processed into hams and bacon, and where things like sausage and scrapple were made. It was also where large batches of bread and pies were baked in that wood-stoked oven, keeping that intense heat away from the family's living space. This was a demanding, around-the-clock operation. It was a system of food security built on sheer hard work. Historians point out that the summer kitchen really became popular between 1850 and 1930. This was a time when farm families, especially in areas like German Pennsylvania, started eating a wider variety of foods. Their expectations grew, and so did the workload. And let's be clear, this was overwhelmingly the domain of women. The summer kitchen became the center of their productive work on the farm. It was a space of intense, skilled labor that was absolutely essential for keeping the entire family fed and healthy all year long. It was hot, heavy, and never-ending work. But without it, the farm simply couldn't survive. The summer kitchen's time as the essential center of most American farms faded as new technology arrived. After the Great Depression, when families had to be smarter with money, electricity and gas stoves started showing up in homes. Today, you won't find many of these buildings outside of history books, except in one very important place: Amish communities.